You have reached the deepest depths of the internet. If it is greatness you seek, you've come to the wrong show. If it's about not wasting time, don't worry, you're never going to get your time back. If it's knowledge you seek, just be aware, any knowledge gained here is going to be minuscule. So now it's time for Accost the Field with Tony Gerdeman on the Ozone Radio Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Got to talk to some Buckeye players, coaches tonight. Saw Nick Bosa back at practice. So much exciting stuff happening.
Yeah, Tuesday night we had Tony Alford and Larry Johnson and Chase Young, Mike Weber. So yeah, a lot to go through and go over tonight, as well as to rehash a little bit of the Penn State game. Right now, Tom, the Cubs are playing. I'm a Cubs fan. So you see, as a Mets fan, I probably have to explain this to you. After the regular season, there's what's called playoffs, and that's where the best teams play to win what is called a championship. They play in a World Series for this championship. So that's what you're going to be seeing over the next few weeks, month, or so. So when you see all of this baseball going on, you're like, what? Why is there baseball on? The Mets season is over. That's why it's called the playoffs.
I got to tell you, if Alabama isn't in it, then I don't think it really counts as the playoffs. There's my position. Roll Tide.
The Cubs want Bama.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they would never be able to hit Tua. We'll transition back to football.
It's nice that we had just set up the fact that, if you hear random squealing from Bird,
right,
it's probably related to something that's doesn't have anything to do with the Buckeyes.
Right, I just want to throw that out there just so you're aware. But Buckeyes coming off the 27-26 win at Happy Valley. We all predicted a win. I think we all predicted by more than 1 point. But that's just the way this series is now. The last 3 games have been decided by 1 point, Tom. And what is it, like 88-87 with Penn State holding that 1 point advantage, but a 2-game loss, 2 losses in those 3 games. And as we saw, James Franklin afterward. Now, this is something that we didn't get to talk about after the game, which you can go catch our immediate reactions after the game from Saturday night, Sunday morning. Go check that out at theozone.net if you want that. But James Franklin, after the game, pretty emotional, talking about the differences between being great and elite, and basically describing his program compared to Urban Meyer's and Ohio State's. And you could just see the frustration. You hear the frustration when you are so close to like conquering Ohio State, and to lose these 2 tough games after having good enough leads to win. But just the frustration, you can hear it in his voice. And I like when he was like, saying, "You guys think I'm a maniac now, just wait." But he wasn't saying it in a negative way, just trying to find all new ways to take his program to the next level, because they're pretty close if you're basing it on Ohio State. You know how Urban Meyer bases Ohio State on Alabama. He might not do that anymore, but that's what he strove for when he first got to Ohio State. James Franklin has that with Ohio State, and you can just see it and hear it, that the frustration and now the determination to not let it happen again.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where you've got to think, after last year, they probably spent 300 and however many days between last year's game and this year's game obsessing about that game, and this is the last hurdle they have to clear, and this is the last team that you could make a real serious argument is clearly ahead of where they are right now. So this is their measuring stick, and they have spent the last year looking forward to this game, hyping up this game. This is their huge recruiting weekend. This is, big whiteout. They basically build their football schedule and calendar around this one weekend. This is it. This is the week they're going to do it. This is this is when everything's going to change in the Big Ten. They've got a 12-point lead with 8 minutes to go, and then the roof falls in again for the second year in a row. I mean, it's there is probably a certain point where, you can focus and obsess over something for a full year, and it really, there's a point up to which that's a positive. And then at some point, you just start going a little nuts. And after the game, he's talking about his players taking even better notes in class, and it was like, what are you talking about? I think that there is a risk that you get too hung up on something like that and too obsessed. And that may have been one of the things that happened with John Cooper against Michigan, where you lost to him so many times, and that became this thing, and they put too much pressure on themselves for that game that it can end up turning into a negative. And I don't know where that point is, where that fulcrum is, where it tips from this is a good thing and we're putting a proper amount of focus and intensity on this one game, the point to which that becomes a negative then, and you're a little nutso and a little obsessed. But you could see him getting there at some point in the next year after back-to-back losses like that.
Well, in this game being in Happy Valley, obviously it's a killer loss, but the next game's going to be in Columbus, so you might not want to throw too many eggs in that basket because it's incredibly difficult to win in Columbus. And I believe by that point, Trace McSorley will finally be gone. And Urban Meyer, even though he loves to watch McSorley play, he won't have to watch him anymore play against Ohio State. Did we finally determine if McSorley is finally gone? I know we had that discussion. How's that preparation going?
It's going great. And let me tell you how well it's going. It is going so well that last week, before the Urban Meyer press conference, they had hard copy editions of the press guide. And in that press guide on page 101, which I am definitely not just looking at right now, it says that Trace McSorley is a graduate/senior. Mm-hmm. So yes, he is done after this year. His major is journalism, which is his second degree.
You knew that without looking?
All the top, yeah. He went to from Ashburn, Virginia, Briarwoods High School. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to know just off the top of my head?
Well, off the top of my head, he threw 40 passes as a freshman in 2015. Is that correct?
That sounds about right. 20 for 40.
If I recall correctly, yes.
Yes, 20 for 40 as a freshman, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns, approximately.
Yeah, so it'll be that's going to be a tough task for Penn State next year. So, while James Franklin does obviously want to move his program from great to elite, they might be due for a step back next season without the guy who, as Urban Meyer said last week, Trace McSorley is the guy who makes everything go. And he certainly did that against the Buckeyes. 175 yards rushing, 286 yards passing, 2 touchdown passes. The Buckeyes got to him 4 times. But, you walk away from that game with the utmost respect. And, interestingly, Dwayne Haskins was the Big Ten Player of the Week, Offensive Player of the Week. But I saw so many Buckeye fans on Twitter and on the message board saying, how do you not give that to Trace McSorley? And Tom, in a losing effort, I would have been fine with Trace McSorley getting that award, but I'm not necessarily going to bang the table for him.
Yeah, if they had given that to Trace McSorley, I wouldn't have even thought twice about it. That's one of those things I'm just not going to get that upset about. Something I will get very upset about: how on earth was Drew Chrisman not the Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week? How? How is that possible? No one returned 7 punts for a touchdown. So how was Drew Chrisman? They gave it to, I think, Purdue's punter or kicker or something, which I took that as it must be one of these, everybody gets a trophy things. They can't give the offensive and defensive and special teams Player of the Week all to Ohio State. So Drew Chrisman got the shaft, but that was, if you're going to be outraged about anything, be outraged about something that's really on brand and hashtag B1G and get outraged about a punter.
I'll say Drew Chrisman was as valuable to the Buckeyes as Dwayne Haskins was. 9 punts, 48-yard average, 58-yard long, 3 inside the 20. By the way, the guy who did win the Special Teams Player of the Week, I believe he punted 8 times, and 6 of those were inside the 20 with a 41-yard average, but based on the fact that he probably did some pinning I thought, you know what, give it to that guy. But Drew Chrisman was outstanding, and he's like the Dwayne Haskins of punters, because you're completely comfortable with him doing, like, they could be backed up, it doesn't matter, and he's got the 9-iron that spins backwards or spins sideways inside the 5, inside the 10, and he has gone from, he's been outstanding since his redshirt freshman year last year. You think, how do you replace Cameron Johnston, who may have had the best 4-year punting career in Ohio State history, and now you've got this guy who, while he is an American, sadly, he's picked up right where Johnston left off, and he may end up being the best Ohio State punter of all time.
Yeah, he on Saturday reminded me a little bit of J.K. Scott during the Sugar Bowl against Alabama, where it was like, even when there was nothing else going right for Alabama, J.K. Scott would just kind of trot on the field and just boom 50-something yards and flip field position, and Ohio State, that was a huge hurdle for Ohio State to try and overcome in that game. And it's like, okay, how much of a weapon can a punter really be? But then you see a game like that, and it's like, oh, yeah, maybe Jim Tressel was right, you guys. Maybe it is the most important play in football.
When I rank the greatest college football players I've ever seen, 1 is Orlando Pace. 2 is J.K. Scott. The 2 most dominating players I've ever seen with my own eyes. Now, I've never seen Orlando Pace punt. I've never seen J.K. Scott pass block. But I like to think they would both excel at either. But I think Orlando Pace would be better at punting. So that's why when I have this argument in my mind, who's the greatest I've ever seen, it always goes back to, could Orlando Pace be a pretty good punter? And I like to think he could. So that's why Orlando Pace, for me, is the best player I've ever seen. It's not just his pass blocking and his run blocking. It's also the likelihood that he could also be a good punter. That's how I judge things.
No one who has known you for more than 5 minutes believes for a second that Antoine Winfield is not one of your top 2. So maybe J.K. Scott is third.
Well, the thing is,
he's definitely not top 2.
Antoine, I don't think he would ever punt the ball. He would just take it and everything would be a fake punt. And I would be like, Antoine, in this house, we punt. We don't take the ball and run with it. We punt, because if we don't punt, then we never get to play defense. And Antoine, that's where you excel. That's why we punt. So you can go and tackle people. That's what we want. That's what we paid for. I don't even want to see an offense out there. No Ohio State offense. We're all-time defense. You know how you play grade school football and you want to be all-time quarterback? We don't need quarterbacks. We don't need offense. We just want Antoine Winfield out there blowing up screens and hitting dudes over the middle and never intercepting the ball, because that's boring, because that just gives the ball right back to the Ohio State offense, which we don't want out there anyway. All defense, all the time.
As long as you run it back for a touchdown every time you intercept it, that's okay. Just don't get tackled. That's the most important part of this thing.
If you're tackled, you're off the team. Yeah. So, Antoine Winfield, he's also up there, as we've talked about in the past. So, Tom, I'll let you go first on this one. What's the best thing that you saw in the Penn State game?
I'm going to say receivers making some plays against a good defense. That was... It was not necessarily all the guys that you'd seen before. So I seeing someone like Ben Victor really step up, make a real impact play in a huge moment. That's the kind of thing that you really are going to need at some point this year. They have all been hyped up to be potential game changers for years, and it's very encouraging to really see that happening this year and this week, even when it wasn't a bombs away Dwayne Haskins' performance like some of the other games this year.
Yeah, I went in that same realm, but I went with wide receiver blocking, even aside from KJ Hill on his screen touchdown. But all of the blocking, the stellar blocking, Terry McLaurin, player of the game, did not catch a pass. Offensive player of the game did not catch a pass. That means it was all of his blocking. One play he took out 3 guys on the KJ Hill touchdown, took out 3 guys. Urban said on Monday or Tuesday, basically when Benjamin Victor was not a willing blocker until this year, and he's done outstanding in that in some plays. We all know Austin Mack is a killer in that regard. Paris Campbell, Johnny Dixon has had some key blocks. I think just and Urban said it this week. He said it repeatedly. The selflessness of these receivers, and it's a position that at other schools is divas and whatnot, prima donnas, but that's not something you can be at Ohio State, and probably not something you could be at Clemson or Alabama or any of these elite programs, because any program that is based on toughness and the running game, you're going to have to block, and that's something that has been the case at Ohio State forever. And I mean, these guys are as good as we've seen as a total unit. All 6 starters, and even C.J. Saunders is playing quite a bit now because he's a better blocker. So the entire unit, just allowing them to go to these screen passes that won the game in the second half in the fourth quarter. Because if they don't have the receivers that can block, it doesn't matter if you've got the receivers that can make guys miss, because you can't make 2 guys miss who have gone through the block and are going to tackle you in the backfield. So it's a complete team effort with the receivers, with those screens. So the best thing that I saw was their ability to block.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that Urban talked about Monday was the 2 things that they look for in a wide receiver before they can play is, 1, can you block? And 2, have you kind of earned it on special teams? I think the outside looking in kind of view is, well, can this guy get open and catch the ball? And there's a lot more that goes into it than that with the Ohio State wide receiver unit. And that's, I mean, we get questions about Jeremy Ruckert, it seems like every week or two at this point, and when he's going to play. And the answer is always, he's going to play when he can block. And it's the same thing with the wide receivers. Once you can do all the other stuff, that's when you can play. C.J. Saunders last year had a 100-yard game against UNLV, but he didn't play a lot because he couldn't, he wasn't a good enough blocker. Now you're starting to see that from him. Now you're going to see him, you see him in the big moments. He had a catch during one of those touchdown drives at the end of the game against Penn State, because they can trust him to be out there and block downfield when they need him to.
I thought it was interesting that we did get to see Ruckert a little bit in this game. One play was even split out wide. So, he is building that confidence in his coaches. I'm not sure that they're going to run his way just yet, but he is starting to grow in that respect. Now, the worst thing that I saw was probably the Ohio State run blocking and the running game as a whole. They rushed for 119 yards on 37 attempts, which is a 3.2 yard average. Now, they did run well enough in the fourth quarter and here and there, but it was never a dominating effort. There just aren't as many holes, and that's been the story all season. And the rushing totals for the Buckeyes has gone down in each game. Now that should end this week, and I don't know if they'll have a game where they rush for fewer than the 119 yards they rushed for in this one. But just, this is a Penn State defense that gave up 245 yards rushing to Pitt and Illinois. And for Ohio State to be held under, twice, half of that, for me, I mean, that's bad, especially when Mike Weber has, he's dealing with a little foot strain. That's fine. J.K. Dobbins isn't. I mean, this offensive line has graded out as champions almost every single game. They're the biggest offensive line perhaps in the country. And this is an Ohio State offense that can throw the ball as well. So you would think if teams are scared of you throwing, there's going to be room to run. And Tom, there was no room to run. So that's why, for me, that was the worst thing that I saw. What about you?
I had that on my list. I had 2 things because I figured one of us was going to pick one of them and one of them was going to pick the other. So you got the offensive side. Just before I get to mine, I mean, we talked to Mike Weber and Tony Alford on Tuesday night a little bit about this. And Weber said part of it is teams are just keying on the run. They are just selling out to stop the run. And, that opens up some of the passing stuff that you've seen downfield, which, they take the points where they can get them. And he said, that's fine. However they're scoring, as long as they're scoring and as long as they're winning, that's fine with him. But you do sense a little bit of frustration that teams are have basically decided, we are going to make you beat us through the air. And if you can do that, then that's fine, but we are not going to let you run. And against Penn State, like, okay, if they're selling out to stop the run, okay, then that explains why you can't run. But, we talked about this a little bit after the Tulane game. Even if Tulane is selling out to stop the run, you should still be able to run.
Mm-hmm.
And Ohio State really hasn't run it as well as you would expect given the talent gap between some of them and some of the teams they've played. So I think that is a little bit of a concern at this point. And, the left side of the offensive line is still gelling. They didn't look great. Malcolm Pridgeon and Thayer Munford didn't have a great game against Penn State, Pridgeon especially. I mean, we'll get to that a little later probably, but there is certainly that is kind of getting to the point that it's a little bit of a concern now, and that's not something I necessarily thought we'd come into the season concerned about. Something that I did think we might have a little bit of a concern about coming into the season that has definitely played out. I would say is the worst thing. My goodness, that second safety position. Jordan Fuller's fine. Jordan Fuller's good, but oh my goodness, every week we talk about them giving up another huge play. This is they had another 90-yard touchdown that they gave up, and Sean Wade said he was playing corner on that play. He was in the slot. He said he just played too far off, backed up too much, basically, let the receiver get inside him and go. But again, Isaiah Pryor took a bad angle, and you've seen this over and over and over again, and they had again, you cannot keep giving up 90-yard touchdowns. That's a problem. That's a real problem. That is something that we have talked in the past about Dwayne Haskins, establishing a new normal for what it is to be an Ohio State quarterback, and that 350 yards and 5 touchdowns is just like, yeah, okay, that was fine. And in previous years, that would have made your eyes bug out of your head. Giving up 90-yard touchdown passes and 90-yard touchdown runs, that is not normal. That is, coming into the year, the longest touchdown Ohio State had given up in its history was 91 yards. They've broken that twice in the first month of the season. That's a problem. That's a real problem. And they have got to get that safety spot figured out. And, I mentioned talking to Sean Wade tonight. I think they have to give that a run because Jordan Fuller is doing great on the one side, but Isaiah Pryor's not there yet. Jocelyn Wint, I don't think, is there yet. I think they've got to figure something else out there because that you can get away with that against some of the teams that they're going to play in the next few weeks, but at some point against a better team later in the year, that is going to bite you and it's going to cost you a game.
We both said after the TCU game, maybe, is that when we said, like, now is when you move Sean Wade, you put him at full time at strong safety to get him out there for this entire week of practice, and then the Tulane game, and then so that he is as ready as can be to be that second safety against Penn State. And now, they're obviously they're moving towards that, and Sean Wade, is. We talked to him tonight, and he said Alex Grinch approached him the Sunday after the first game of the season. Would you be receptive to move to safety? And Sean Wade's like, yeah, I'm fine. I just want to get on the field. So way back then, they began this process. It seems, I don't know, that position, he says it's different than he's accustomed to because you like move backwards, and instead of, you're right there locked on a receiver, you're further away and then you've got to catch them. But it doesn't seem like, and I'm not a football coach, but it doesn't seem like it would take this long to turn a cornerback into a strong safety. They turned Zach Boren from a fullback into the starting middle linebacker Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 5 days. He was a middle linebacker. And here we are 5 weeks into the season. Sean Wade, a dynamic, one of the most dynamic athletes on the team. And yet, now this week you'll see probably Jocelyn Wint starting because Isaiah Prince has to miss Isaiah Pryor. I'll be glad when Isaiah Prince is gone. That guy, get him out of here. There should only be one Isaiah P on this team at a time. And so help me if they recruit another guy and sign like Isaiah Parker, I'm going to flip. All right. But once Isaiah Pryor is out for the first half, it'll be Jocelyn Wint and then probably Sean Wade behind him. And when we weren't sitting to. I don't think we were sitting together at Penn State because the way that the press box was set up. But when Isaiah Pryor left that game, I thought, oh, that's really bad news for Ohio State, because we've seen Jocelyn Wentz struggle even more than Isaiah Pryor. Pryor might have a couple of missed plays, but Jocelyn Wentz seems to have a larger percentage of his plays become detrimental to the Ohio State defense. So maybe now you really ramp that process up, because something has to give, and it can't always be the Ohio State defense.
Right. They have the fact that they approached him about moving over there on the Sunday after the Oregon State game. I mean, I think that's right about the time that everyone else knew there was an issue at that position too. So I'm sure it takes a while to learn and get the new techniques down and learn your different responsibilities and that kind of stuff. And I get that, but I mean, I think that goes right back to the conversation we had after the TCU game, which was, that's great. What's there right now isn't working, so now you have to try something else because you don't have the luxury of blowing this season because you didn't want to, you wanted to screw around with safeties who were not ready to be playing at the level that you need them to be playing at to achieve the goals you want to achieve this year. So I think that the time to move him there was at the very latest after the TCU game. And then, if he blows some coverages against Tulane, fine, whatever, it doesn't matter. And yeah, I mean, they will probably be fine if he, you move him to safety and he blows a coverage against Indiana this week, or he blows a coverage against Minnesota next week. I mean, you have a couple weeks now where if you're going to make that change, it's worth making it, because you can probably get away with the mistakes there again for the next week or two. But Purdue's not going to be the easiest out in the world, and and then you get into November and you're facing some teams that can really beat you. So I think that Sean Wade told us Tuesday night he is in the safety room exclusively. Like, that's where he is. He's watching film, getting coached up with the safeties. He's not going back and forth between the safeties and the cornerback rooms like DeMario McCall is with the running backs and the wide receivers. He's just staying in the safety room. So, I think that they see that that's probably going to be, where he ends up, or they, at least they recognize that the situation is not resolved right now and it needs to get fixed one way or the other. So, I kind of get the sense that they've kind of been crossing their fingers and hoping against hope that Isaiah Pryor can, take a step forward and be able to play at the level they need him to play at. But he's not there yet, and I don't know how much longer you can continue that experiment right now. I mean, I feel like every time I talk about Isaiah Pryor, I have the same disclaimer, which is he's going to be real good at some point. He's just not there yet, and he's a true sophomore. He's young. Like, when you were a true sophomore, first year starter, this is sometimes what it looks like. It happens. This does not mean that he should, you should write him off for the rest of his career, but you can't have this kind of a mistake this frequently with this kind of consequences as a defense and expect to be playing for a national championship. If you want to be playing for a national championship, that has to get fixed. The offensive line has to get better. The linebackers have to get better. That safety position has to get fixed. I mean, there's some stuff that has to get fixed, and they have some time to do it now. So however they're going to fix it, that's fine, but you got to fix it.
The other thing is there's no playmaking from that position. And that's a position where, Malik Hooker in 2016, you had Jordan Fuller there last year, where things get done there, and positive things, and not just the things that should get done, but things that shouldn't, like players, like making plays on the ball, interceptions, making an impact positively for your team. And I think that's something that Sean Wade is probably more capable of, but this is, we're just assuming that. And, we talk about this learning process and this learning curve, and Sean Wade has been the number one nickel since week 2, but even, the 93-yard touchdown that he gave up, he said he stepped back instead of going forward once the ball was snapped. And so, he he's still making mistakes, but he's a redshirt freshman. That's going to happen. But he learns from them and then he progresses. And I think right now it would be better for the team if he's learning those mistakes at strong safety rather than nickel, even though, they need a nickel as well. But that, Damon Arnett was fine there. Now the corners can rest more. But I still, Shaun Wade has to be that guy at some point, or at least they have to let him try to be that guy. And if he's not, that's fine. But at least now now you can just move on with Isaiah Pryor and try to make him the best Isaiah Pryor he can be as soon as possible. But, I think everybody wants to see Shaun Wade given a chance because, there are some players who just respond once, the lights are on. And not that he's not a practice player. I'm sure he is. Everybody says he is. But for me, like, Shaun Wade just feels like a gamer, a guy who's going to make plays. And I guess maybe that's why we can overlook, you see the interception early in the season. You can overlook the 93-yard touchdown that he gives up because he hasn't done it like several times. When Isaiah Pryor is the guy who has been chasing quite a few touchdowns, or Jocelyn Wint has been chasing quite a few touchdowns, or this guy is missing tackles or that guy is missing tackles, then you start to question them. That was really the first poor play in Shaun Wade's brief career, and that's what you're going to get sometimes in this defense when everybody's playing man and you get beat by one skilled athlete and it's done. But no, he needs to get involved at safety, and I think this is the time. It should have been sooner, but now if it's going to happen, Tom, and we've said this ad nauseum, it has to happen. There's no reason for it not to happen now.
There's a pretty good segment of the Ohio State football fan base that's just ready to try something, and even if it doesn't get better, just try something different because they're tired of watching the same issues. Let's have some different problems now to watch. I think that based on the fact that he's in that safety room, based on the fact that Pryor's out for the first half against Indiana, if it doesn't happen now, I don't know when it's going to happen. This is pretty much the perfect setup for it to happen. So give it a shot. You've got a couple games where you're going to be favored by 3 or 4 touchdowns for the next couple weeks. So give it a shot, see what you got, and even if you don't have him playing full time, have him just splitting snaps with Pryor, and Pryor's still getting reps, and he's getting reps, and Jocelyn Wint's getting some reps, and see what you got. But I think you have to give it a try, and how much worse could it really be?
Yeah, and that was one of the frustrating things. The second half of that Tulane game, he was back at corner. So this is an opportunity where the game is over. Now you can let him play a position that I'm sure he's been learning, but they're like, no, go back and play corner, which you haven't been doing for, in practice much for weeks now. I'm sure he does it here and there, and it's never, cornerbacks, Tom, once a corner, always a corner. So they feel like they can just go right back to it. But I think that was an opportunity to get him at safety. And we could spend the rest of the show talking about that whole topic and our frustrations with it. But we know Urban listens, so we don't want to burden him with a whole bunch of defense talk. Speaking of Urban, I think since this coach in waiting thing and the suspension thing and the medication, I'm seeing tweets to me and posts on message boards about everybody is overanalyzing Urban Meyer's demeanor during press conferences, be it post game, be it Mondays or Wednesdays. And for me, I haven't really seen any difference. We see him all the time, all the time being 2 or 3 times a week during the season. And I haven't really noticed any huge, or even much difference. Now, I saw some people saying he was short or just wasn't in a great mood on Monday, but he was joking. We were all laughing at some of the things being said. The post game at Penn State, people are saying, I don't know, maybe the TV cameras during the game were showing him stressed out, but that's not new. when he's always like hands on his knees. I mean, that's his posture pretty much. I mean, that's his normal posture. Most people stand up straight. No, Urban is like, he's like an end table, just hunched over, got a lamp on his back. But like the post game, that's an emotional game like that. It's kind of a whirlwind finish. But we've been in post games like that before. I think people just need to calm down on trying to figure out why is Urban Meyer acting so different when this is basically how he's always been from what I've seen.
Yeah, this is the 7th year of Urban Meyer. This is not Jim Tressel. Jim Tressel was always like extremely stoic on the sidelines, and everyone was wondering when they're losing, is it a problem that Jim Tressel's too stoic on the sidelines and doesn't show emotion on the sidelines, and is that a problem? And now you have a coach who's kind of 180 degrees from that. Not like Woody Hayes or even kind of recent vintages of Jim Harbaugh in some cases, but he's animated on the sidelines. He wears his emotions on his sleeves at times, and that is an extremely stressful environment, an extremely stressful game. It's a very high stakes thing. I mean, this is, you lose that game, you go from probably the Big Ten college football playoff frontrunner to, you probably need some help to get in. You need a bunch of other teams to lose, and you no longer control your own destiny. And that's, Urban Meyer has spent the last year trying to get this team in a position to win the national championship. So, when it comes right down to it, when the season's on the line, like it was on Saturday night, yeah, you're gonna be a little stressed. That's just part of the job. But he comes out on Monday, like you said, he's joking around with reporters, he's smiling, he's laughing. I mean, he was laughing, reporters were laughing. I mean, it was very much a normal Urban Meyer. If anything, it was a more lighthearted Urban Meyer than we have seen at any point really this fall. I think that was a lot of pressure on Saturday night. And then once it's done, I think that was, he was probably completely worn out after that game. That was a long, I'm sure a long day of preparation and a very high stress environment, and everyone was tired. None of the players that we talked to were, just absolutely giddy at the end. They were happy on the field, and then by the time they get to the post game interviews, the adrenaline's kind of worn off, and then you're kind of gassed because that was a really draining game. So, yeah, I wouldn't read too much into it. If he's freaking out during the, I don't think you're going to see him freaking out on the sidelines during the Indiana game too often. I mean, if they give up a bunch of 95-yard touchdowns, sure, but I don't think he's going to look real stressed out at the end of the game against Indiana like he did against Penn State.
But Tom, as I tweeted out, Ohio State is undefeated this year when they have given up a 90-yard touchdown. So they're 2-0. That's part of the plan to win. But, I would just tell fans, the next time you watch an Ohio State game against a top opponent, do it while standing the entire time, and then see how your posture changes. Do you ever bend down? Do you ever put your hands on your knees? Do your hands ever go to your head? You just have to stand there and watch it in agony because you can't do anything about it. And then, do that for 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours while all of these commercials are going on. And then now the game is finally over and you can be relieved. And now you have to go into a room full of, 60, 50, 40 reporters in a hot, stuffy room and talk about the game. And it was the same Urban Meyer I've seen after, Michigan games or, other Penn State games or Purdue games. It just relief and exhaustion. I'm still tired. We're still tired from this trip to Penn State. So a home game has come and arrived at the good time.
Yeah, a noon game would be fantastic, but 4:00 isn't bad. So we'll take that.
Yeah, I'm very happy that the Minnesota game is a noon kick. I know a lot of fans don't like it, but not to go all complainy, but these late nights at Penn State, these night games, they should all be outlawed, Tom. Noon games, if you want to kick off at 10 in the morning, I'm cool with that too. Sooner the games are over, sooner I can get home. And this is work. It's a long day. We could spend the next 45 minutes complaining about having to go to Penn State and deal with parking and grass around drunk idiots. But we get that at Ohio State too. So,
Did you see the video today? I
so
tweeted it
amazing.
out. The video of a Penn State fan. We when we were driving in, uh, there were just drunken idiots walking in the middle of the rows of parked cars. And Penn State's kind of weird. They have like open fields, but they have little curbs in them with numbers. So you have an assigned parking spot. So we were in parking spot 9,000 and whatever, 57 or something. And so you're driving up and down these rows of, in this field, you're driving up and down these rows with these, little curbs with the numbers on them. And you have people with tailgating tents set up in the middle and drunken people stumbling all around. And it was like you could feel your blood pressure rising driving around this stupid field full of drunken idiots. And then apparently at some point, this must have been after we walked in, there's a video that I think the CBS News account tweeted out today. I tweeted it as well today if you want to look on my account. But it's a Penn State fan apparently punched a police horse, and the Pennsylvania State Police responded by bringing a helicopter in and flying it really low, and the rotor wash from the helicopters blew over a bunch of tailgating tents, and there was a big mess as a result of this. It was quite a disaster. I don't want to say what kind of show it is because there may be kids listening, but it was a show that started with an S.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know, yesterday or today, and then I saw it was talked about on our message board, and one of the posters is a pilot talking about all the different FAA violations that that were made by flying a helicopter that low to the ground, and so they did it for police reasons, but somebody's going to be in trouble for that one, and not just the tailgaters. So just drunken, out of control police idiots, in Penn State, I guess, as well. And that's when I tweeted, I think today, just imagine Karen Holbrook, getting a pilot's license just to go do this throughout, Ohio State tailgates, just up and down each aisle, watching, all of the tents go and just cackling, with glee at all of the beer cans and the red cups, and just be so happy that these absolute drunken orgies are getting ruined by her helicopter. Tom, do you have a good name for the helicopter?
I'll try and think of one. I before we move on, I just want to say I don't know whether this is like a cultural thing at Penn State or what, but like if you walk through the parking lots at Ohio State after a football game, there are not like mountains of garbage all in all of the parking spots. Like you can walk through and it's an empty parking lot, and it's like a normal. I mean, even as we're walking out of the stadium, whatever 3-4 hours after the game, like a normal time, it looks like a normal parking lot. Basically, the garbage cans are maybe a little overfilled or whatever, but that's it. At Penn State, there are just piles of garbage everywhere in the middle of these parking lots, in the middle of these fields, just huge mountains of bags of garbage. Like I can't even imagine how many garbage trucks full they have that they have to drive through these parking lots and pick up this garbage, presumably the day after. It is the strangest thing. Like, put your garbage in your car and take it home. What's wrong with you people?
But like I said, Tom, these are high ticket parking spots. They don't take garbage home,
And I think Karen Holbrook would have called her helicopter the chop blocker.
All right. You know what, Tom? Back in the 80s, you had like older women were the stars of their own shows, like Angela Lansbury and things like that. We could maybe do something with Karen Holbrook, not for the Friday night block, but maybe like a Sunday night block where maybe she like solves mysteries with her helicopter, and then on weekends she destroys tailgating areas.
Can you imagine the crossover episode when she and Brown Thunder do a crossover episode? The rotor wash over the paddle boat out on the water. I mean, whatever the stunt budget is for that, totally worth it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to double it. At least $80 that week. So we've talked quite a bit about the running game. I did want to mention how surprised I was at how not great at running the ball Dwayne Haskins is. We've seen him and do some scrambles. And he's not fast, but he had a 17-yard run earlier this year. He had a 22-yarder against Michigan last year. So there was some capability. This was the first game where you're like, wow, he is really not very good at running the ball. And maybe it's because they could pick some better plays for him to run. But Tom, there just wasn't the kind of, like, you watch him run against Penn State and you're like, well, now I know why there's no QB power in the offense. And now you know why there's like no QB draw. It's, he says he can run a little bit and do whatever they ask him. And it's clear that they're only going to ask him to do so much because they don't think he can do everything, as much as even a guy like Cardale could.
That has been a little bit of a surprise. We had very limited, obviously, exposure to him in games, in meaningful games last year. But one of the things you saw was that scramble against Michigan where he almost ran it in for a touchdown, set up a short touchdown a play or two later. It has been a little surprising that it hasn't been better than it has. I think that, we'll stay real on brand here as the Tate Martellus podcast on all of these interwebs, but I think that they're going to have to look at, if they can't get him to be a more effective runner, they're going to have to look at either having Tate Martell come in for kind of those short yardage plays, or Weber and Dobbins together in the backfield and run some kind of a wildcat look or something like that. So you have two effective runners back there, so you have some options. Because it's just, right now, it seems like third and short, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1 was just about automatic in recent years. And you don't feel that way about this offense anymore, which is crazy because, you do, like you said earlier, they have a big offensive line. They have two extremely strong running backs that you should, and you have the threat of a passing game that should be forcing the defense to back up. So it is pretty surprising that it hasn't clicked. It doesn't feel like they have a go-to play on 3rd and short, 4th and short, like they have in recent years. We talked to Mike Weber tonight on Tuesday night and Tony Alford, and someone asked him, so what is the best play for this team on 3rd and 1? And he said he was somewhat biased, but he thought it would be inside zone because that would, of course, be a play where the running back gets the ball. So, I think that Tony Alford kind of demurred and said, kind of depends on what the defense is giving you and all that kind of stuff. But I think they need to find something that can be sort of a go-to play where if it's 3rd and 2, they know they can just pick it up. Because if you're pretty much automatic on 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, that opens up your possibilities a lot more on 2nd down and on, if you pick up 7 yards on 1st down, then you can do whatever the heck you want to on 2nd down if you know that you can pick up 3rd and 3 without a problem, with pretty consistently. So they have to solve that problem at some point. And I don't know whether that's, I don't know whether that's Haskins can do that or not, but it hasn't looked like he's the answer there right now.
Part of the problem with finding that go-to play is that they're running so much tempo, and when they get a short yardage thing, they want to go right away because they feel that gives them an advantage against the defense. But if you're rushing something to where you're not getting your best opportunity, then like, who are you really hurting or who are you really helping? And that's why, Tate, that's not necessarily an option if they just want to keep going with the hurry up. But it's not like they have to. They do control the clock and they do control who comes in and who leaves. So if they wanted to change some things, they definitely could. And we've talked, well, like last year with JT, you could do anything, but anything was always QB power because he was in there and everybody would just spread out. Here, I know that the Wildcat killed the game with KJ Hill, but that's not the same Wildcat that I'm talking about here doing maybe with whichever running back is in there, JK or Mike Weber. You can still do that QB power with them and just spread out, split out Dwayne Haskins. They're still going to have to go out and cover him because if you don't, then it's just a quick throw to the quarterback if you want to do that. But if it's all about the numbers and the defense knew what was coming last year with JT, but they still had to spread out because you still have to defend everybody. And Now the numbers are equated, and now you only need that 1 or 2 yards. I think you can do that with Dobbins or Weber if you can't find something else that works. But like you said, they need to find that thing that Dave inside zone that find their own Dave this year that Tressel loved, the QB power that Urban loves, and because there are going to be times where it is necessary. Think of the Michigan game 2016. This Penn State game, J.K. Dobbins picked it up barely. Now, I will say the running backs picked up everything, all of the short yardage plays, opportunities that they were given on third and fourth down. Like the only one that they didn't pick up, the running backs didn't pick up, it was a 3rd and 2, but then Dobbins got it on 4th and 1. So when they relied on the running backs came through. And I think if that continues, then maybe you don't need a one play thing. Maybe you've got several options that you can rely on. And with the variety that maybe makes you as dangerous as the one play that always works, like the element of the defense doesn't know what is coming evens out and makes the play more effective. But something has to give, and because it's not going to be Dwayne Haskins running the ball, clearly.
They have lots of options there. You have plenty of talented players that if they want to have, say you put Mike Weber to take the snap and you got J.K. Dobbins next to him and you send Paris Campbell in motion and, you can either hand it to Paris Campbell on kind of like a jet motion or you run kind of a zone read with Weber and Dobbins. I know it's not that easy to just say, okay, now you run this play because you got to be reading the defense and that kind of stuff. But I think that's something that they could work in, something like that. You've got options. You have talented players. You have the pieces that this should not be something that you're struggling with. So, again, this is something that they have kind of gotten away with so far, and you can get away with this against most of the teams on your schedule. But at some point, if you want to get to where this team wants to get, this is something you're going to have to get solved.
And I talked to J.K. Dobbins in the preseason, somewhere in the spring or winter or summer camp, about would the Wildcat interest you? And he's all about, he's very willing to do the Wildcat. And, Mike Weber is willing to carry the ball at any point as well. We'll see if that comes to pass. Now, the quarterback sneak has been a popular topic, and it was brought up on Monday. Like, why don't you, Dave Biddle of Bucknuts asked Urban, like, why don't you quarterback sneak it? Get under center. And Urban was like, well, you take 99.9% of your snaps from shotgun, and then when you try to go under center, you have bad snaps, you fumble the ball a larger portion of the time, and that's not just something he says, that's something that all spread shotgun offensive coaches say. And so then Dave's response was, well, why don't you just practice it during the week? To which Urban said, duly noted. Thanks for the coaching tip. And everybody laughed, and then you move on. But it is a question that we on the outside would have, like, well, why don't you just practice it? And to which Meyer undoubtedly would be like, we only have time to practice what we have time to practice, and we should be able to get a yard from the shotgun, which they usually can. And not that the QB sneak is flawless, but they did it with Cardale in 2014. But I think then they had time to work on it with him, because he had weeks between the Big Ten championship game and the playoffs. But it's just not something that shotgun offenses, most of them, the coaches just aren't willing to even, he said they talk about it all the time, but it doesn't sound like these conversations are ever that serious.
Well, here's the thing. When they got in the victory formation at the end of the Penn State game, Dwayne Haskins was under center. So you're trusting Dwayne Haskins to take snaps from center with a 1-point lead, trying to run out the game, trying not to Oregon versus Stanford yourself and, fumble it and give the game away. So you trust it in that situation, but you don't trust it in a QB sneak situation. That doesn't really makes sense to me. I mean, I guess you're not, the defense theoretically isn't rushing as much or whatever.
I think that's what it is.
I guess, but if you can do it then, you can do it another time. I would think that the real issue is if that's the only time you get under center, that it's, a real obvious tip-off that this is the only thing we're going to be doing from this formation or whatever. But, I don't know. Show some jet motion or something out of that and give the defense something else to look at. I don't know. I mean, it seems like that's a very obvious solution. Dwayne Haskins is a very, very large gentleman. He's a very tall gentleman who can reach the ball out. I mean, you can, if you need 1 yard, that does seem like, if he can just fall forward and get that yard, it seems kind of silly to start him 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage. But that is what they're doing right now, and it doesn't seem like that's going to change anytime real soon.
Duly noted. I am always in favor of the jet motion, and because you go back to when Wisconsin does it, it always it's a pain, to follow the ball, and it could be going anywhere, but it just adds another thing for somebody to think about and slow them down a split second. Now, a group of defenders for the Buckeyes who were sped up this past week were the starting linebackers, Tuff Borland, Malik Harrison, and Pete Werner, all graded champions. First time for Borland and Werner, first time in his career for Werner. So they responded well from the lack of tackles in the Tulane game. That's a pretty good sign. Dante Booker must have been hurt. He didn't play. We saw quite a bit of Baron Browning out there as well on passing plays. And the linebackers, based on this game, are trending up. But we also saw, how Tuff Borland struggled chasing the football. It looked like he is not 100%. And when I forget even what the play was, but he was chasing the football and losing very badly, and then Baron Browning came in after that. I think we talk about this rotation at linebacker. It's pretty clear that they love Tuff Borland as the run stopper, but on third downs you've got to have more mobility out there, and that's why he hasn't been out there. It's been mainly like Baron Browning will be out there, or it'll just be Pete Werner and Malik Harrison. But I think maybe as Baron Browning grows and gets better, maybe this middle linebacker rotation begins to solidify as Tuff Borland gets more healthy, and as they play teams that aren't as good as TCU, aren't as fast as TCU, and aren't as fast as Penn State. Tuff Borland will maybe get his own speed back, his own footing back, and then when it's time again to play Michigan State and Michigan, now Tuff Borland is ready for those guys. So I thought it was definitely a better performance by the linebackers, and things are trending in the proper direction there.
It is a sad state of affairs when you can give up 175 rushing yards to an opposing quarterback and think, you know what, that was better. That was things are looking up. That means you are coming from a bad, sad place. The play you're talking about with Borland he was chasing Trace McSorley up that right sideline on that 51-yard gain for McSorley. I think it was in the second quarter. And yeah, I mean, you could see him losing ground to McSorley with every stride. He just clearly does not look 100% right now. So, you'd certainly hope for him that he can kind of gradually improve and get, feel more like himself throughout the season and get better and get, more up to game speed. But yeah, he is not a 3-down player right now. It doesn't look like. And, I think they have sort of figured out a workaround there, and the linebackers did look better. I would say I feel reasonably confident that Malik Harrison is going to be able to do a pretty good job this season. I think he's done a pretty good job all season. Browning is kind of showing flashes. Borland had some plays on Saturday that looked. He had a sack that was good. I think he had another tackle for a loss.
Forced fumble.
That was a forced fumble. Yeah, Borland had made some plays. He's not where you would want him to be yet, but he's doing better. Pete Werner is, looks like he's sort of starting to figure things out a little bit. So yeah, there is improvement for sure out of that unit. I think for the first half of that game looked not very good for the linebackers, it seemed like. And the second half, it seemed like they were doing, they looked more like an Ohio State linebacker unit should look, which is good. I mean, that's any kind of progress you can take from them this year, you're going to take it, because there have been positions, the safety position. I don't know that you've seen a whole lot of progress there. So if you can see progress out of the linebackers, and you're gonna take that.
I thought it was interesting. Malik Harrison started out the game as at the Sam, and Werner was at the Will, which is a flip from what they've done in the past. So then I think they eventually changed back. So I don't know, what the reasoning was. I'm sure it's something they saw and they wanted to try, obviously. But you wonder, is it difficult to get consistent, Tom, if they keep moving everybody around? Baron Browning and Tough Borland, that's one thing. You're both playing the same position. And yeah, Will and Sam technically are, they have the same duties. It's just the Sam is more likely to be defending, slotted over a receiver. But Pete Werner has told me in the past, they are different, because, you're more, at Will, you're more of the run stopper. At Sam, you've got to worry about a receiver or a tight end. So that they are different. And, the how do you build that consistency if you're flipping back and forth? But yet here we are, Tom. They were all champions. So apparently Bill Davis has figured it out. Just don't let anybody play the same position for too long. Just keep everybody, hot foot. And now the offense doesn't know who's coming from where, and you can just attack, and you don't get, you don't sit somewhere too long and leg falls asleep or something like that. That's the worst, So you just move them around. You never let them get comfortable. And that's one of the things that Luke Fickell always said about his linebackers. He didn't want them to get comfortable. So maybe that's what Bill Davis is doing here. He's like, you've sat in that chair, for 14 minutes. Now you got to get up. I'm tired of you just being there. You go be somewhere else now. And you got kids, that. You're like, just go do something. Just go do something else right now. Just go do something else. And maybe that's what he's doing with his linebackers.
There have been games where I felt like the linebacker unit might have spent part of the game like watching cartoons and eating Captain Crunch. So I mean, it does kind of seem like that, but it's kind of similar to the safeties, where there's an argument that you just want Isaiah Pryor to get as many reps as he can at safety, and that's how he's going to get better there. But there's also the argument that, well, you're playing for something pretty big this year, so you don't really necessarily have time to let people just kind of figure it out. And if there's someone else that you maybe need to give a shot there, then you have to give them a shot there. So I think that's the same thing with the linebackers, where, you want to get those reps because these are all young guys. And, Malik Harrison played a decent amount last year, but he's, I think, technically considered a first-year starter. And Pete Werner's a first-year starter. And Tough Borland, was not a full-time starter last year. He played some, but not all. Baron Browning's a first-year starter. You need to get these guys reps to get them, just get them up to speed with everything they need to know how to do. And recognizing things as they're happening and all that kind of stuff. But if you're not 100% sold on the fact that these guys are, this is absolutely the best place for this guy all the time, then, you do have to maybe move people around a little bit just to try and figure it out, because they cannot solve it to the point where it's a C, grading out as a C. They have to solve it to the point where it's, a B+ or an A to get where they want to get this year.
We could probably give Chase Young an A for his performance. 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, I believe, were the numbers. A couple of passes defended, including 4th and 1, 4th and 2, something like that. That ended a drive, for Penn State. His performance, he was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week. We talked to him on Tuesday, and he said it was probably his best game, but nowhere near how good he should be. He mentioned that every time he didn't play with his hands, like fighting with his hands with the offensive lineman, he lost. And so these are lessons that he takes from each game and uses it next week, and he'll be better on Saturday than he was this past Saturday. He also mentioned the fact that this is always a special game for Larry Johnson, and so that gets the entire defensive line ramped up. And that's when I asked him tonight or Tuesday night, you think about the Joey Bosa sack to end the game in 2014, the Sam Hubbard tackle of both McSorley and Saquon Barkley last year, the almost forgotten diving, leaping sack by Jalen Holmes on Penn State's third down on their final drive. And then you've got Chase Young ending the game with his tackle for loss on Miles Sanders. Does Larry Johnson, his drive to want to beat Penn State, that he said that elevates them in these games as well. And that's probably partly why you see the defensive ends and the defensive line making so many plays late in the game. The other reason you see it is because of the rotation. The Sam Hubbard play, like Nick Bosa wasn't even in the game at that point because you didn't need him. You had Jalen Holmes, you had Tyquan Lewis, you had Sam Hubbard out there. And that ability to rotate and keep guys fresh, James Franklin said it on Tuesday's teleconference. They ran out of gas. Tom Allen said, Indiana head coach Tom Allen said it on Tuesday's teleconference that Indiana ran out of gas against Ohio State last year. You don't see Ohio State generally running out of gas. And that defensive line is a huge part of why that is and why they make plays at the end. And now Chase Young, Tom, this was his game to announce his presence to America. But the good thing about it is, yeah, he saw his positives, but more than that, he saw all of the negatives where he could become even better. And that's what his plan is moving forward.
Yeah, you mentioned the hand fighting with the offensive linemen. When you watch those defensive linemen go through their pregame drills, I think people would be surprised at how much of them is just, it looks like they're having a slap fight with each other. They're you're kind of swatting their hands away, you're pushing their arms away. And that is something that Larry Johnson very much emphasizes. We see them work on that in the spring. When we go in and watch practice in the spring, you see them work on that before every game. That is a big point of emphasis for him. So, that's something, if Chase Young is recognizing that can only mean good things for him. That he's, the light's coming on. He's realizing he can't just necessarily always get by on just pure physical ability, because pure physical ability is going to let him get pretty far, a lot further in life than it will get most people. But if then you can also take the coaching you're getting and apply that. That's going to be that's going to only pay off for him more down the line. He had an unbelievable game. He was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week. He won some nationals at the Bednarik Award, National Defensive Player of the Week, something like that. He had 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and those were not, the 2 sacks were not his biggest plays. Penn State was 1 for 3 on 4th down. Both of the 4th downs that they failed to convert. One of them, he swatted down a 4th down pass, and the other one, he tackled the Miles Sanders on that 4th and 5 at the end of the game. To stop 2 different 4th down plays, that's basically forcing 2 turnovers in essence. Those are enormous plays, and that wasn't something that got talked about a ton after. You heard people talk about the end of the game, the last play of the game, obviously, and people talk about the sacks and that kind of stuff. But that is about as good a game as you've seen an Ohio State defensive end have. And this wasn't like, he's just running past overmatched UNLV offensive tackles or something like that. This was on the road, big stage, doing it in a game where they were playing without Nick Bosa. This is the game where you really needed someone to step up, and he stepped up about as impressively as you could possibly imagine someone stepping up in that kind of situation.
The guy he replaced in the starting lineup is Nick Bosa, and for the first time, Nick Bosa was back at Ohio State. We saw him after practice. He had his jersey on, had shorts on. Obviously, he's not doing any work or anything, but I think he just recently got back to campus, and all of his teammates were happy to see him. Chase Young said it was good to have him back, and Chase Young wore 97 on his tape for that Penn State game. So you saw the working out video of what he's doing now. You posted about that. You wrote about that this week. When we were talking about it like last week or when this happened, about the possibilities that we might not see him back at Ohio State. You watch him working out, you see him back at Ohio State now, and it would seem to me like they've had to talk with the family, like, yeah, I want to play this year again. And now it'll just come down to the reevaluation in November if that's feasibly possible. But to me, when I see him back on campus now and I see him, trying to get back as quickly as possible. He's not doing that for the combine, Tom. He wants to get back here with the Buckeyes.
Right. You want to be back with your teammates. You want to, you want to be back involved in probably watching film and helping guys prep and all that kind of stuff. But also, if he's coming back, I mean, he has to also be going to classes because the national championship game is after the start of the winter semester, right? So he would have to make sure he's eligible for winter semester and going through classes all fall like he would need to just keep himself eligible. So yeah, I mean, I think everything that we have seen from him and what about him as a person too, I think that I would expect him to come back. I cannot imagine someone from that family decided, you know what, I don't need to go play Michigan one more time. I'm good. I don't need to go play for a national championship one more time. I mean, do you think he wants to hear forever at Thanksgiving dinners Joey saying to him, well, I got a national championship at Ohio State. Why didn't you? I mean, I think there's going to be a whole lot of stuff that's going to drive him to wanna, do everything he can to come back. And if physically he can't, then physically he can't. But I fully anticipate that if he is medically cleared in November, that he will be back on the field and trying to whether that's for the Michigan State game or the Michigan game or the Big Ten championship game or the bowl game, the playoff, especially if it's the college football playoff. I think he's going to do what he can to get back on the field as long as it's not going to jeopardize his health, long term. If it's not, if he's not at a risk of re-aggravating the injury or whatever, I think he's going to do what he can to get back on that field.
And we've talked to him a bunch of times where he has said the national championship is the goal this year because it's the one thing he doesn't have, and his brother has one. So he's was an All-American as a sophomore, would have been All-American this year if he had been able to play. Joey got his national championship as a sophomore. Didn't quite happen for Nick Bosa, but this is his last chance to get that and to equal his brother. And that's definitely going to be a driving force and a reason to stick around. Some other personnel updates. We mentioned Isaiah Pryor out for the first half. With Jocelyn Wint will likely get the start. I think Urban said that then Shaun Wade would be the number 2 as of this point behind Wint in the first half. The injuries, Draymond Jones has a slight ankle sprain, is probable. Robert Landers is probable. He's better than he was last week. Meyer said he wasn't himself last week and didn't have a great game because he was hurt. Mike Weber, his foot is getting better. He's probable as well. For me, Tom, I don't know that I would play Draymond Jones this week if you don't have to. And maybe you play him a little early and see how things go, and then you get him out as quickly as possible and let the other guys handle it. We know how valuable he is. You can't afford to lose him and Nick Bosa. This defensive line is as deep as anybody, but you take away the 2 best players, and now it's still deep, but the impact at those 2 positions is tough to make up for. So I wouldn't, be opposed to maybe, I don't think they'd sit him outright, but you don't have to play him the 30 or 40 snaps that you might normally.
I'm right there with you. I didn't see him coming off the field on Saturday, but going back and watching the game again, he was, I don't remember if it was who it was. It might have been Haskell Garrett was helping him off the field. He was limping. He looked bad coming off the field on Saturday night. And he was in a walking boot when we talked to him later in that evening. So I would play it real safe with him. Ankle sprains are the kind of things that can linger and linger and linger and not ever completely heal. For weeks and weeks and weeks. That's the kind of thing that he could be living with not being 100%, through the Big Ten championship game, and then maybe only it's the time, that rest between the Big Ten championship game and the bowl game or the playoff game that really kind of gets that back to 100%. I would not mess with it. Maybe you dress him, maybe you play him a little bit against Indiana, but if he was not out there and not dressed against Indiana, that wouldn't really surprise me. They didn't dress Robert Landers against Tulane, and he could have played, but why bother? Maybe you dress him and you just don't play him I don't know, but I think they ought to keep it, play it real safe with him, because that's something that if you hurt it again, or if someone falls on it awkwardly or whatever, it just nothing good can really come of playing him. And I don't, this is not a game where they should need him. So just go, Indiana's offense is not very good. So you should be able to stop them with, with any of an assortment of other defensive tackles who are all also very big and very strong and very fast and very angry, and who could use the reps. So I would just hold them out if I was them.
Indiana is scoring 28 points a game this year. They're giving up 21. They're 4-1. Their lone loss is to Michigan State by 14. Last week at Rutgers, they were up by 17 at the half, 17-0, and held on for a 24-17 win. So, they're doing as well as Indiana can do, but there's a reason Ohio State is, the huge favorite that they are. I don't see the Hoosiers posing much trouble, but Urban Meyer likes their quarterback Peyton Ramsey because he can run and throw. And he says, talking about the Hoosier defense, they have answers for everything. They might have answers for everything, but it's not always the correct answer. I've got answers for everything too, Tom. But, you grade my paper and you're going to see that it's not going to be a 99 or a 100. The defense, they're not talented enough to have all of the correct answers. But he's obviously a big fan of Tom Allen. And, in a few years when Tom Allen finally does get fired, I could see maybe Urban reaching out to him like, would you like to be my defensive coordinator? Or coach linebackers for my new defensive coordinator, Bill Davis. So.
Oh, sorry, I was laughing at something else. What were you saying?
Pregnant pause. So that I don't think there's much concern on either side of the ball for the Buckeyes, and I think that's is that enough Indiana talk?
I mean, just so people know that you have a vision in your head of what Indiana football is, and it's Kevin Wilson, Indiana, where they're scoring lots of points but giving up a whole lot of points and losing some really exciting games, 49-45. This is like the exact opposite of that. Their offense is not particularly good this year. It's not explosive this year, but their defense is pretty good. They're 89th in S&P Plus on offense and 22nd in S&P Plus on defense. So, and they have virtually they're almost dead last in explosiveness, big plays basically on offense. So that's a good matchup for Ohio State, because if you can't make big plays, that you're not going to score against Ohio State. So, I mean, they're 4-1, but their win expectancy over against Michigan State was 5%, which basically means even though it was a 2-touchdown game, they had basically no chance to win it. And Rutgers, even though they won it, it was 64% was their win expectancy in that game. So that's, that if you're playing a game that's basically a toss-up against Rutgers, that's not a real good sign for the kind of football team you are. So, they have a good enough defense that they'll probably keep it interesting for a while. But if Ohio State gives up 24, 28 points this week, that's a real problem, because this is not an offense that should be scoring more than, a couple touchdowns against Ohio State at the moment.
And as I've said before, Xander Diamant is not coming through that door, so don't worry, Buckeye fans. Your nightmares aren't going to be, coming through and stepping foot on Ohio Stadium ever again. All right, you can let it go and don't worry about them anymore. Tom, before we get to listener questions, I think we should talk about Tim May announcing his retirement. Well, actually, he didn't announce it. The Dispatch announced it and let everybody know. And for me, the early days on this beat, when I was really on it full time, and even before then, when I was just on it part time, Tim May, who has been on the beat since 1977, I believe, and could be one of those beat guys who is, just the most arrogant person on the beat because he's been around everything, kiss my ring. And he's the exact opposite of that. He's the friendliest guy, and from the very first day that I was ever on a beat and knew nobody other than John Parentis, Tim would talk and had no reason to talk to me, but would. And Tom amazingly still talks to me to this day. He's just a really good guy. I haven't even talked to him about the retirement yet, but I'm gonna miss him. We still got all season in the bowl game, maybe 2 bowl games, but just so people know, you hear him all the time, you see him all the time. He's just a really genuine guy, a really good dude, and will be missed on the beat.
Yeah, absolutely. He is. I mean, you summed it up. He is the guy who could be the really arrogant, kind of anchorman kind of persona, who's the long term. I'm the king of this castle kind of thing, and he is completely the opposite. Very nice guy. Very, very. I mean, if you've ever listened to an Ohio State press conference, you know his voice. He's got the very thick Texas twang. Really, really nice guy. Yeah, he will just come over and shoot, after a press conference, if you and I are talking, he'll just come over and shoot the breeze with us for a little while, or, but it's not like we're special. He just goes and shoots the breeze with everyone. He just is a very, very friendly, nice guy. And when he's done, if he wants to write a book of all the stories that, we've heard him tell that he's never written, or that, all the things he's seen and heard over the years that he's never written before, I would be first in line to buy that book, because he has great stories, and he will absolutely be missed. I think I tweeted, like, I can't imagine Ohio State press conferences without him, and he said, "That's funny, I can." So that's Tim, a real treasure
indeed. But enough about Tim. This is our show. Let's get to the listener questions.
All right. First one from @burner account69. Is it time to give Blake Hallbill some kicks during this upcoming run of games?
We funnily enough, we totally forgot to wonder aloud if we would see Blake Hallbill on Penn State during Penn State, because that's the 5th game of the season, and we mentioned the possibility of redshirting, but the kickoffs have still been the touchbacks aren't automatic, so there's still plenty of value in having him kicking off, and he's doing an outstanding job this season. But yeah, I don't think it would be a bad thing to give him some opportunities, but you always have to be careful of messing with the starting kicker's head. When Sean Nirenberger, we talked about this after the Penn State game, he's not the most, where are you comfortable and trusting him? How far out? And I think we're maybe in the low 40s where you're comfortable enough. Now, if you start giving some of his kicks to Blake Hallbill, Tom, does that number then start to shrink because now he's got stuff going on in his head that don't need to be there?
That's kind of the running joke with kickers is, #college kickers. And it's, it's a very difficult position. There's a lot of it is mental. It's a difficult place to be consistent. It's the kind of thing, and you can, one bad kicker can completely derail a season. And Nürnberger's been fine. He just hasn't been outstanding. He's missed some kicks in a couple big games. It's not the worst. This is better than, who was the kicker in 2016 that missed 2 or 3 field goals against Michigan? Was that Tyler Durbin?
I think so.
Tyler Durbin.
Yes.
Yeah. This is not an issue to that level, but I do think, maybe you can do something like what they did in the mid 90s, where Josh Jackson was pretty good inside 40, but then outside 40 was just couldn't do it. So maybe you start giving Hallbill, if you're going to try a 50-yarder, let Hallbill try that. But, and it's just, you have a short kicker and a long kicker or something like that. I think there is value in getting him some placement kicks just to get him ready for next year, give him some game experience. And, maybe if you're up by a bunch of points against Indiana, when you're playing your second string, everything else, you let Blake Hallbill do some of, do the place kicking in the second half, and you just tell Nürnberger in advance, hey, this is just what we're doing. It's not, we're not taking your job away from you. We're just, we want to get him some experience. So I mean, Sean Nurnberger is not one of the 3 or 4 biggest issues on this team right now, so I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it. But yeah, I think that there is some value in getting Hobbill some experience.
I
Sure.
agree.
All right, next question from @Tony Gerdeman, who just had to have some basketball talk in the show. How about Chris Holtman with another stud recruit?
That's a great question, and I had to make it a question so that we remember to talk about it. They got a commitment from Illinois forward EJ Liddell, 6'7", 220, the number, I think, 48 player in the nation, the number 9 or 10 power forward, the number 1 player in the state. Kind of reminds me of a more athletic Deshaun Thomas, maybe, similar size, but a guy who can, I think, maybe finish better around the basket. Doesn't quite yet have Deshaun Thomas's perimeter game, maybe, but not a bad guy to perhaps aspire to be. So that gives the Holtman 3 top 50 players in the 2019 class. They are pretty much tapped out now unless somebody leaves. But you've got DJ Carton, the point guard, 5-star point guard, who is like the number 24 player. You got Alonzo Gaffney, who is around top 40-ish, 6'9", small forward, who has wing skills, guard skills, in a tall, skinny power forward frame who he'll have to get stronger, but he's got ball skills. And then you got Liddell, who, like I said, he's a versatile forward. And I think they probably a top 5 class in the nation at this point, but I think they're going to top out at 3 guys unless something else happens.
This year is going to be probably a little rough. You lose Jay-Sean Tate, you lose Keita Bates-Diop, and there's a whole lot of questions on the team this year. Now, there were a whole lot of questions last year, and then they went 15-3 in Big Ten play, so you can't quite write them off yet. But this is you figure they're going to take a step back this year. But with this class coming in 2019, like get on the bandwagon now, because it looks like Ohio State is pretty clearly on the upswing in basketball. That is, 3 top 50 recruits in a class is, basketball is a sport where you can bring in one class and it can completely change your program. And this is the kind of class that can do that. So, they have a decent core right now. You're going to have, Caleb Wesson still has another year after this one, so you'll have Caleb Wesson around for another year to play with these guys. So you've got, kind of the veteran front court guy, and you've got some of the, the talented young point guard, and some other pieces around them, and you can really see Chris Holtman building something pretty impressive here. But just enjoy this season for what it's gonna, for what it is, and then look forward to next year. All right. Next question from SoCal. What's more important, winning a national title or beating Michigan?
Tom, the obvious answer is winning a national title. In fact, I think there would probably be a certain joy for Ohio State fans, and maybe I'm completely wrong on this, to have the national title and even losing to Michigan and still pointing at Michigan fans and saying, like, yeah, so what, you beat us, it doesn't even matter. Like, losing to you has no bearing on us anymore. We've got the championship. Here's the ring. Here's the trophy. Like the witch of the West or the East, when she tells the wicked witch of the West, like, be gone from here. You have no power. That's sort of what Ohio State fans would be doing with Michigan fans. Be like, just go away. Let me polish this national championship trophy. Yes, congratulations on your one win in the last 8 attempts. Congratulations. Now, I hope that makes you feel good about your season. Oh, remember, it's the same season where the Buckeyes won a national title.
I like the fact that you reference one of the great classics of American cinema in The Wizard of Oz. And in my notes, I have, it's kind of like the theme song for Married with Children. You can't have one without the other. We all have our own cultural touchstones, I guess. That's fine.
But remember, last week I said I was raised by a single mother. I do love my musicals.
You do love your musicals. I think that it would be very difficult. Now, Alabama just did this last year, losing their regular season finale to an arch rival and still winning a national championship. So it's not impossible, but it would not be easy for Ohio State to do that. But yeah, I kind of like your idea of Ohio State fans taking like this perverse glee in it. It seems like there should be a German word for it, like losing and taking joy in it, Losenfreude or something. That I could see that being a thing. But yeah, it was. I would not attempt to do that because I think there's a pretty good chance that by losing if you lose Thanksgiving weekend, there's a pretty good chance you're not making the college football playoff if you're not coached by Nick Saban.
I got you.
Next question from Indiana Buckeye. When the coaching staff of future opponents reviews the Penn State Ohio State video, what will they most discover about the 2018 Buckeyes?
I was actually thinking about this question, and for me, it's just the depth and the overall talent. And Tom Allen was talking about that today. Just you see players at every position that could start somewhere, but they're second and third teamers. So for me, it's just the sheer amount of depth, and not just depth, but talented depth, playmaking depth at most of the positions. Now, obviously, we've mentioned a couple where that isn't necessarily the case, but overall, when they look at it, if you look at the receivers, you look at the running backs, even the quarterbacks, offensive line, defensive line, and even the guys that are question marks, like at linebacker or safety, would be starting at all of the teams, or most of the teams that will be playing Ohio State and looking over this roster. So even though, you're listening now and you may have a stink eye towards one of these guys, like Tom Allen is thinking, I could really use him. So when they look at the roster, to me, that's what they see. That's what they're going to take away from it, is just the talent and how much of it there is.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Alford talked about that a little bit on Tuesday night, where people were asking him about, how he has coached for teams that were on the other side of this, very, very strong team versus not necessarily as strong team kind of mismatches, and how you go into that, and what do you, how do you approach that kind of game, and he basically said, you go in knowing the other team has players that are better than our players, so you have to kind of scheme around it. But you go in knowing, like, hey, we're at a pretty big disadvantage. So, yeah, I don't think this is a big surprise to Tom Allen that, I don't think Tom Allen will pop on the video and go, hey, these guys are actually pretty good. I don't think that'll be a huge surprise to him. But, yeah, I mean, the depth is going to be, that has to be the big takeaway, because for Penn State, which is recruiting at a somewhere between number 5 and number 10 in the country every year, to get out depth by Ohio State to the degree that they did, to the degree that it really wore them down, what chance does Indiana, who's recruiting in the 50s or the 60s most years, like what chance do they have, in terms of not wearing down a game? So yeah, I would agree that's certainly up there. I mean, you probably learned something about the fact that, there are some vulnerabilities on the back seven of that Ohio State defense, but, you probably knew that before watching the Ohio State Penn State tape too. So, all right. Next one from at LOIGEOFF._1.
Now you've got to pronounce it.
Is it Logoff or is it log off? Because it kind of seems like I was going to say log off, but I'm sure it's not supposed to be log off.
To me, it's a play off of log off. I would say Loigoff.
Loigoff. Okay. Loigoff. Loigoff_1.
Oh, wait. You know what? Maybe it's letter of intent, Jeff.
Oh, there you go. I have to wait till February to answer this question. What teams left on the schedule have tight ends talented enough to exploit OSU's linebacker weakness? I can think of one that they will play Thanksgiving weekend.
Yes, and Tom, I was also doing research on this one just 1 minute ago. Purdue tight end Bryson Hopkins has he's 11th in the Big Ten in receiving yardage with 308 yards on 17 catches, but against Missouri and Nebraska, he went over 100 yards receiving. Missouri 5 for 136 and a touchdown. This past week against Nebraska, 5 and 103 and a touchdown. So clearly, this is a guy that the Buckeyes are going to have to be worried about. He's had at least 3 catches in every game except for the season opener against Northwestern. So I am thinking 7 catches, 160, and maybe, I don't know, between 2 and 6 touchdowns against the Buckeyes. And then you mentioned Michigan with, 3 tight ends who all could have an impact in that game. So yeah, those two teams are the first two that, well, Michigan is the first. And then when I did my research, now 120 seconds ago, I saw this guy, Bryson Hopkins at Purdue. So keep an eye on Purdue when Ohio State heads there. And then Michigan with their all tight end offense, 5 offensive linemen, a quarterback, a fullback, a running back, and then just the entire rest of the offense is tight ends, and they run all different routes, and they're not super fast, but Jim Harbaugh loves them, so they're out there, and those are the 2 teams you'll have to worry about.
Yep. All right, next one. From at @dgribble_Kurt. Do you see any trap games in the future between now and Michigan State or possibly Maryland before we play Michigan?
And Tom,
I think we talked about this. I don't remember if we talked about this on the podcast after the game or just after the game, but the next month does not look as difficult for the Buckeyes as September did. You've got Indiana this weekend, you've got Maryland, you've got Minnesota, and then you go to Purdue, and that trip to Purdue is just a little like you gotta be a little concerned because Maryland and Indiana. You're playing at home; they're not very good. That you should not have a big problem with either of them. But West Lafayette's kind of weird. It's just a weird place. It's a weird stadium, and that team has some big play receivers. I mean, you just talked about the tight end. They're a decent team. They're a better team than the record would indicate right now. I think they're 1-3 or 1-4, something like that.
2-3.
They could 2-3. Okay, and they could very easily be 4-1 or
5-0,
potentially even 5-0. Yeah, I mean they have been a much better team than the record would indicate this year. It's the second year for Jeff Brom, so he's kind of got a system in place now. That is a game that when you first looked at the schedule, you just kind of went, that seems like a game like Ohio State will go in by favored by 24, and they'll at least get a scare that game. I would be more surprised if Ohio State won that game by 35 points than I would if Ohio State, won it by a touchdown or something, or if that was a very close competitive game in the last 5 minutes.
We've seen that before over the span of both Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer. Just sometimes there's something about Purdue, but yeah, they lost the season opener to Northwestern by 4, then Eastern Michigan by 1, then Missouri by 3. So they're 8 points in those 3 losses, and they gave away the first 2. And I'm sure Missouri at home, they'd like to have that one back, but yet that's the answer. The Purdue game is the biggest trap on the schedule. And a couple of weeks ago, it didn't look like much of a trap, but they've responded with the 30-13 win over Boston College, and then the 14-point win at Nebraska, which, say what you want about Nebraska, it's still Purdue going on the road and winning a Big Ten game. So that's, Indiana did it at Rutgers. Purdue has done it at Nebraska. These are, you can't just write them off as no big deal. It's still winning on the road in the Big Ten. And as Urban Meyer says every week, winning in college football is really, really hard.
Just to give you a sense, I talked earlier about the post-game win expectancy stat that S&P Plus has. It just basically measures, based on your efficiency on offense, based on your explosiveness on offense, and your efficiency on defense and explosiveness on defense, and, kind of negating some turnover luck and that kind of stuff. How often, if you played this game 100 times, how often would you have expected to win it? Against Northwestern, they were 62%. Eastern Michigan, 58%. Missouri, 64%. Those were all losses, and they were, they probably should have won all 3 of those games. Boston College, 100%, and Nebraska, 61%. So, they should be probably at least 3, at least 3-2 or 4-1, at least, just on average, and they're 2-3 instead. But yeah, they are a team that does not look very impressive on paper, and just seems like the kind of team that will, if Ohio State comes in there just a little bit flat, they will give Ohio State a heck of a fight.
I also think maybe this is the Iowa game from last year helps this year because they saw what was possible if you don't go in thinking it's possible. So now they know they can get their butt kicked by a team that they are better than. And not only do they know that they can lose, but like I said, now they know that if you don't show up, you will get embarrassed. So now they know they have to show up every week, and you'd think that they would take that seriously. The last question, Tom, I think we've pretty well covered it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean it's about the safeties. It's from at Brutus Buckeye 13. We've said enough mean things about the safeties, so I think we can consider that one crossed off the list.
All right, and that will do it for this episode. We thank you all for listening. We'll ask you again to go review us, rate us on iTunes. 5-star reviews are preferable, as you might guess. So we'd ask that you do that. We thank you to those of you who have done that. We'll ask you to continue to listen to the entire schedule of podcasts on the Ozone Radio Network all week long. And then don't forget about our Accost the Field show after each game. And this week, Tom, we might actually get it put out before the calendar turns to Sunday morning.
Of all the things that we have to look forward to this weekend, I think having a podcast out on a Saturday evening is definitely up there. So before you head out to the bars on Saturday night, all you crazy kids out there, be sure to listen to our podcast.
Or just stay home.
Free game with our post game.
So we do thank everybody for downloading and listening. It's pretty cool. So we will talk to you guys after a big game against Indiana. Everybody have a good day. Take care.
We could steal a car and leave.